Title: Married to a Stranger. When Sam agreed to a sudden, unconventional marriage to save a woman's life, he never imagined how deeply his own heart would become entangled. Emma, a woman with a troubled past and walls built high, finds herself married to a man she barely knows, yet who is determined to protect her. As they navigate the unfamiliar terrain of marriage, their differences and Emma's hidden fears threaten to tear them apart. Chapter 1. A Collision of Fates. Emma's day began as it always did, carefully scheduled, filled with meetings and emails. Her life, while successful on paper, was void, the result of years spent guarding herself from emotional connections. At 35, she was a powerhouse in the business world, but that strength came at the cost of vulnerability. Past betrayals had left her suspicious, especially when it came to people, and her relationships had become transactional, much like her career. On that quick Monday morning, Emma moved through the crowd, eyes on her phone as she read through the day's agenda. The familiar scent of espresso greeted her as she pushed the door open to her favorite coffee shop. She had ordered the same drink every morning for years. A grande latte with extra foam, something comforting amidst the chaos. The routine brought a sliver of control to her unpredictable days. But today, something disrupted her carefully crafted routine. As Emma reached for her coffee cup, her shoulder collided with someone's, sending the burning liquid splashing across her wrist. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, her voice sharper than intended. Emma's eyes shot up, meeting the calm gaze of a man standing before her. He was younger, mid-30s, his casual attire contrasting with her perfectly tailored suit. His expression didn't waver, though. He didn't fire back with anger. Instead, he bent down, retrieving her bag and the papers that had scattered across the floor. "Are you okay?" he asked calmly, his tone surprisingly gentle. Emma raged in frustration, brushing the hot coffee from her wrist with a napkin. "I don't need your help," she said, though the sting of the burn was still visible on her skin. She hated that she had been careless. She hated that he had seen her vulnerable, even for a second. As she gathered her things, Emma felt a wave of dizziness hit her like a sudden storm. Her vision blurred, and the buzzing coffee shop seemed to pause. Without warning, her legs tumbled beneath her, and she collapsed, her world going dark. When Emma woke, the delicate scent of antiseptic filled her nostrils. The soft beep of a heart monitor echoed faintly in the background. She blinked slowly, her eyes adjusting to the bright, fluorescent lights above her. A hospital room. How had she ended up here? Her first instinct was to check her phone, and as she reached for it, she noticed the man from the coffee shop sitting by her bedside, looking out the window. "You fainted," he said without turning. His voice was calm, steady, just like it had been earlier. "The doctor said you're exhausted. You've been pushing yourself too hard." Emma felt a mix of embarrassment and frustration wash over her. She was supposed to be in control, not fainting in the middle of coffee shops, let alone being rescued by strangers. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice more accusatory than she intended. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Because you needed help." The simplicity of his answer caught her off guard. No agenda, no ulterior motive. Just help. Emma wasn't used to that. She had learned over the years that help always came with strings attached. Sam, the man who had come to her rescue, introduced himself with a warm but understated smile. He was a fashion designer, as it turned out, living a life far removed from the high-powered corporate world Emma was established in. Yet there was a quiet confidence about him, a steadiness that she couldn't quite place. He left shortly after ensuring she was all right, but not before leaving his number. "In case you need anything," he said before walking out the door. Emma, still dizzy from the strangeness of it all, tucked the number away, fully intending to forget about it. After all, she didn't need anyone. She had built a life where emotional ties were weaknesses, where people couldn't hurt you if you didn't let them in. But something about Sam lingered in her mind. Maybe it was the calmness he emitted in the face of her defenses. Maybe it was the fact that he had helped her without expecting anything in return, a norm in the transactional world she lived in. As Emma lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, she realized that despite everything, the walls she had built, the distance she maintained, something had shifted. Did the collision at the coffee shop, both literal and metaphorical, crack something open in her? The next morning, Sam's phone pierced the silence, bumping him from his morning routine. The hospital's number flashed on the screen, sending a wave down his spine. The voice on the other end was urgent, "Please come immediately." Sam's mind raced as he recalled the mysterious woman he'd rushed to the hospital just yesterday. According to the nurse, despite her fragile state, she'd spent the entire night typing away on her laptop, driven by an unknown force. But shortly after midnight, exhaustion had taken its toll, and she'd collapsed en route to the bathroom, slipping into a coma. As her guardian angel of sorts, the hospital had called Sam, entrusting him with the devastating news. Sam's grip on his phone tightened as the nurse's words hung in the air like a dire prophecy. The urgency in her voice echoed through his mind, conjuring images of the woman's frail form, her determined eyes locked onto the laptop screen. He recalled the previous day's events, the accident, the rush to the hospital, the fleeting moments of consciousness they shared. With a deep breath, Sam shook off the paralysis. He had to be there, for her, for answers. Rushing to grab his keys and wallet, he sprinted out the door, the city's morning chaos blurring around him as his mind raced with questions. The hospital's corridors loomed ahead, promising both revelation and uncertainty. Sam burst through the hospital's sliding doors, the antiseptic scent and muted chatter enveloping him. He followed the familiar path to her room, his heart racing with anticipation and concern. As he entered, the nurse from the phone call greeted him with a gentle smile. "Sam, thank you for coming." She's stable, but her voice faded and Sam's gaze shifted to the bed. The woman lay motionless, surrounded by beeping machines and 4 lines. Her laptop, still open on the bedside table, seemed like a testament to her unyielding spirit. Sam approached, feeling an odd sense of intimacy, as if he'd known her for years, not just a day. He gently brushed a stray lock from her forehead, his fingertips grazing her soft skin. "Who is she?" he whispered to the nurse. The nurse hesitated. "We couldn't find any identification. No family or friends have contacted us." A pang of responsibility struck Sam. He felt a deep connection to this mysterious woman. Chapter 2. Life on the Line. The soft, rhythmic beeping of the machines filled the hospital room. Sam sat in the corner, his eyes scanning over the unconscious woman lying on the bed, tubes and wires connecting her fragile form to life-saving equipment. Emma, the woman he had met just hours ago, now fought for her life. The doctors had delivered the news with cold precision. She's in a coma due to extreme exhaustion. Her heart's weak, and without surgery within the next 24 hours, there's a chance she might not make it. Sam wasn't sure why he stayed. Maybe it was guilt over the coffee shop collision, or simply the thought of leaving someone alone in such a desperate time. As he replayed the events of the morning in his mind, Sarah, Emma's assistant and closest confidant, entered the room. Her face was pale with worry, hands trembling as she reached for the nearest chair. "What are they saying?" Sarah whispered, though her voice betrayed the fact that she already knew the answer. "They need to perform surgery soon," Sam said quietly. "But there's a problem. No one is legally authorized to approve it." Sarah slumped in her seat, eyes wide with disbelief. Emma had no family, no one to make medical decisions on her behalf. Sarah, despite her closeness to Emma, wasn't authorized to sign anything. Time was slipping through their fingers. "There has to be another way," Sarah muttered, standing up and pacing the room. "She can't die because of a legal technicality. She worked too hard to get here." Sam could feel the weight of Sarah's panic. The silence between them was thick until Sarah's eyes lit up, a spark of desperation in them. "What if you marry her?" Sam blinked, completely caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "If you marry Emma, you'd be her legal guardian. You could approve the surgery," Sarah said quickly, as if rushing through the idea would make it more palatable. Sam shook his head, confused. "I don't even know her. How could I possibly?" "I know this is crazy, but she has no one else. She's worked her entire life, and everything she's built is at risk if she dies. Please, Sam. I know it's asking a lot, but Emma is a good person. She doesn't deserve this." The clock ticked on, each second a reminder of the decreased time. Sam thought of walking away, but something in Sarah's plea, in Emma's quiet presence, binds him to the moment. He sighed, rubbing his temples before speaking again. "Are you sure this is the only way?" Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Please, just help her. I'll deal with the rest later." Hours later, the hospital's dim lighting added to the tense atmosphere as Sam stood at Emma's bedside, waiting for the impromptu ceremony. A nurse had agreed to officiate, and with just Sarah as the witness, Sam said the words that bound him to Emma in the most unconventional way. "For better or worse," he whispered, though Emma remained unaware, locked in her coma. The papers were signed, and with a nod from Sarah, the doctors began preparing for the surgery that would determine Emma's fate. Sam stepped back, the weight of what he had just done settling on his chest. He had married a stranger to save her life, and in doing so, had tied his fate to hers. As the doctors wheeled Emma into the operating room, Sam and Sarah exchanged a glance filled with silent hope. Neither of them knew what would come next, but both knew that Emma's future hung in the balance. Sam stood outside the operating room, pacing the cold, empty hallway. Time seemed to stretch on forever. Would the surgery be a success? Would Emma wake up and discover that her life had changed in ways she never could have predicted? The tension in the air was thick. Sam checked his watch. The operation was taking longer than expected. Every passing minute made his heart race. Then, as if fate had been waiting for the perfect moment, the door to the operating room opened, and the surgeon stepped out, his face unreadable. "Is she?" Sam began, his voice breaking with the weight of the question. The surgeon's response would change everything. Chapter 3. The New Reality. Emma's world twisting in the midst of confusion as she blinked her eyes open, a clear white ceiling staring back at her. For a moment, everything was blank. No names, no places, no sense of time. Her limbs felt heavy as if weighed down by an invisible force, her mind trying and failing to grasp at memories that danced just beyond reach. A figure stood beside her bed. Two figures, actually. One stood with a calm, steady posture while the other was more worried, her hands clasped tightly together, eyes filled with concern. Emma's gaze lingered on the calm one, a man with warm eyes and an air of reassurance that seemed to bind her to reality. "Sam." The woman's voice broke through the fog. Emma's eyes moved to her. "Sam? Was that his name?" It sounded familiar, yet foreign. Her heart raced. Why couldn't she remember? A doctor entered the room, bringing a sobering weight to the atmosphere. "Emma," he began, glancing at the others before fixing his gaze on her. "You've experienced significant trauma, both physically and emotionally. The urgency of your surgery and the stress your body endured have caused a temporary loss of memory. But with time, it will return. You need to be surrounded by familiar, caring faces to help jog your memory." Emma's chest tightened. She could barely piece together her own name, let alone who these people were. The doctor continued, "This is Sam, your husband, and Sarah, your closest confidant." The names should have stirred something, but they didn't. Still, Sam, with his comforting presence, gave her a sense of security she desperately needed. She held onto his gaze, nodding as if that acknowledgement alone would help her regain what she'd lost. Sam stepped forward, offering his hand. Emma took it, her grip firm, seeking assurance. His touch was warm, grounding her in the present when the past felt like a distant dream. "We'll get through this," Sam said softly, his voice steady. Discharged from the hospital, Emma stared out the window of the car as the city rushed by, the buildings and streets sparking no recognition. Sam sat in the driver's seat, his eyes focused on the road, while Sarah, in the back seat, seemed ready to burst with concern but kept herself composed for Emma's sake. As they pulled up to what was apparently her home, a beautiful, modern apartment, Emma's heart fluttered with unease. Nothing about the building looked familiar. Her chest tightened again, a creeping anxiety that only Sam's voice seemed to calm. "Take it slow," he advised as he opened the car door for her, his voice steady. "One step at a time." Inside, Emma's apartment was a cold reflection of her now blank memories. Everything was new, organized, like a showroom rather than a home. Sarah helped her to the couch, offering small reassurances. "We've all been through a lot," Sarah said, her voice gentle. "But you'll get better. Sam's going to stay with you, help with your recovery." Emma looked between them, the weight of the situation sinking in. She didn't know this man. Not really. Yet here he was, her supposed husband, agreeing to stay and care for her. The strangeness of it all ate her up, but there was something about Sam's unwavering patience and warmth that made her feel comfortable. The days passed in a strange rhythm. Emma and Sam fell into a routine. Quiet meals, short conversations, and gentle reminders about things she should remember. Sam was kind, never pushing too hard, never rushing her to recall what she couldn't. It was awkward, though. Every glance, every interaction reminded her that this was a man who knew her life in ways she couldn't grasp. One evening, as they sat in the living room, the silence stretched thin between them. Emma looked over at Sam, wanting to break the tension, but unsure how. "What was I like before?" Sam glanced up, a rush of emotion crossing his face. "Strong, determined, but you carried a lot on your shoulders." Her lips pressed together, the words hanging in the air. That version of herself felt distant, like a stranger she'd never meet. "I wish I could remember." "You will," Sam replied. "In time." Despite the awkwardness, a connection slowly began to form between them. It wasn't forced or sudden but obvious. A series of quiet moments that gradually shifted from uncomfortable to comforting. There were moments when Emma would catch Sam's gaze lingering on her, not with the intensity of romantic longing, but with genuine care. It was as if he saw her, not as a woman with lost memories, but as someone worth waiting for. In those moments, the confusion that often clouded her mind would clear, replaced by a fleeting sense of security. And then, one evening, while Sam was preparing dinner, Emma found herself watching him, her gaze drawn to the way his eyes blinked at the corners as he concentrated on cooking. A question lingered on her lips, one she'd been too afraid to ask until now. "Why did you do it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam paused, looking at her over his shoulder, his expression a mix of surprise and fear. "Do what?" he asked, setting the pan down on the stovetop. "Marry me," Emma clarified, her heart racing. "I mean, how did we meet?" Sam walked over to the table where she sat, his movements fluid and steady. For a moment, he hesitated, his gaze dropping before he met her eyes. "I don't really know," he admitted, his voice laced with vulnerability. Emma's eyes widened in surprise. She'd expected a straightforward answer, not this doubtful revelation. "At first, it was just to save your life," Sam continued, his words sending a shock down her spine. "But now, I think I'm just hoping I can help you find yourself again." His voice faded, and he rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture that spoke of nervousness. "We met at a coffee shop," he added, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "It was quite funny, actually. We collided, and the rest, as they say, is history." His eyes blinked, but Emma sensed he was hiding something. Anyway, as time goes on, you'll get to remember everything, Emma, he reassured her, his tone gentle. The honesty in his words hit Emma harder than she expected. For the first time since waking up in the hospital, she sensed something, hope, maybe, or something more. Sam wasn't a stranger anymore, at least not in the way he had been. Emma's curiosity got the better of her. She wanted to ask what he meant by saving her life, but something held her back. Instead, she let the silence stretch between them, filled with the promise of secrets yet to be revealed. Emma's recovery was slow, with bits of her memory returning in fragments. Some days were better than others, with flashes of familiarity triggering small recollections, while others were a frustrating blur. But through it all, Sam stayed. They navigated this strange new reality together, their relationship deepening with each quiet moment shared. Emma couldn't remember the woman she used to be, but in Sam's presence, she found comfort in the possibility that she might not need to. Their journey was far from over, but for now, they had each other, and that, for the time being, was enough. Chapter 4. A Gentle Care. As the days turned into weeks, Emma's recovery became less about the physical healing of her body and more about her emotional well-being. Each morning, Sam would bring her tea, sitting by her bedside while they talked about day-to-day things, the weather, the flowers blooming in the yard, the quiet rustle of life outside the house. But beneath these simple conversations, there was an undeniable sense of connection forming between them. Despite her amnesia, Emma's soft attitude and openness were apparent, very different from the woman she had once been. Confident, driven, and at times emotionally distant. Now, she was like a fragile flower, seeking warmth and comfort. Every small action Sam took, whether it was helping her walk around the room, holding her hand to steady her, or just sitting quietly with her when she needed rest, was met with gratitude in Emma's eyes. However, for Sam, the situation was far more complicated. On one hand, he was drawn to her vulnerability, her gentleness, and the way she seemed to look at him with a mixture of trust and something else, something deeper. On the other hand, he couldn't forget that this woman had no recollection of their past or the circumstances that led them to their marriage. Emma, although plagued by fragmented memories, was growing more attached to Sam by the day. She would lightly kiss his cheek or peck his forehead, hoping he would respond, perhaps hold her close, or even kiss her back. But Sam never crossed the boundaries of their caretaker relationship, even though they are legally married, always gently pulling away or redirecting her attention to something else. This restraint, though meant to protect Emma from confusion, only heightened the tension between them. Emma could feel her emotions growing stronger, but her confusion about Sam's lack of affection made her question herself. Was he truly her husband? If so, why didn't he respond to her touch? One day, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun set in the distance, Emma turned to Sam and, for the first time, voiced the question that had been tormenting her. Why do you keep your distance from me? You're so kind, so patient, but there's something between us that I don't understand. Sam looked away, his jaw tightening. He had expected this moment to come, but had hoped it would be later, when her memories had returned and she understood their unique situation. But now, he had no choice but to address the elephant in the room. Emma, he began, choosing his words carefully, I care about you more than you know. But there's so much you don't remember. I don't want to confuse you, or make things harder for you while you're still recovering. Emma frowned, her brow furrowing in thought. But I feel like there's more. Something I can't remember, but my heart tells me it's there. Sam sighed deeply. There is more. You and I met under unusual circumstances. Our relationship wasn't what you might think. Emma looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Tell me. I want to know everything. He recounted how they had met by accident at a coffee shop, and how her sudden accident had thrust them into a whirlwind of events, but that was it. He wanted her to remember all by herself, because despite her calm attitude, her memories would erupt something buried within. So he told her that as time went by, the rest would be clear to her. As he spoke, Emma's expression shifted from confusion to sadness. The weight of her lost memories pressed down on her, and the realization that she had married someone she barely knew, someone she now depended on entirely, felt overwhelming. "But you've been so kind," Emma whispered, her voice breaking. "Why would you do all of this for me?" Sam hesitated before answering. "Because I care about you, Emma. Even though our relationship started in a way neither of us could have predicted, I've come to care about you deeply." Emma's eyes welled with tears. She reached for Sam's hand, gripping it tightly. "And what about now? What happens now?" Sam looked at her, his heart aching. "Now, we take it one day at a time. I don't want to pressure you or make you feel like you owe me anything. Your recovery, physically and emotionally, is what matters most. And when you're ready, if you ever want to talk about us, we will." For the first time since her accident, Emma allowed herself to cry, not out of frustration or fear, but out of the overwhelming mixture of emotions that had been building inside her. Sam pulled her into a gentle embrace, letting her cry against his chest. The bond between them, though fragile, was undeniable. And while Sam remained steadfast in his role as her caretaker, Emma's feelings for him continued to grow. Over the following weeks, Emma found herself constantly thinking about Sam. His patience, his quiet strength, the way he always seemed to know when she needed support without her even asking. It was becoming harder to deny the feelings blooming inside her, even though she still didn't fully understand the history between them. One afternoon, as Sam was helping her walk through the garden, Emma stopped suddenly, turning to face him. "Sam, do you think, could we ever have something real?" she asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Sam looked at her, surprised by the directness of her question. "What do you mean?" "I mean, once I remember everything, once I'm healed, do you think we could ever be more than just this?" Emma gestured to the space between them, the unspoken distance that still lingered despite their growing closeness. Sam hesitated, searching her face for signs of clarity. "Emma, you've been through so much. I don't want you to feel like you have to rush anything or that you owe me anything." Emma shook her head, taking a step closer to him. "I'm not talking about owing you, Sam. I'm talking about how I feel. I care about you. And I want to know if there's a chance you feel the same." Sam's heart raced as he looked into her eyes. For a moment, he was at a loss for words. But then, with a gentle smile, he nodded. "I care about you too, Emma. More than you know." The moment hung between them, charged with emotion and unspoken possibilities. And while neither of them knew what the future held, for the first time, it felt like they were both ready to face it together. Chapter 5. Fractured Memories. The morning light filtered through the curtains as Emma sat beside Sarah, their laughter filling the room. It was the first time in days that Emma had felt a sense of normalcy, her mind temporarily at ease from the confusion that had clouded her thoughts since she woke up in the hospital. Sam had gone out on an errand, leaving the two women to share stories over tea. Suddenly, Sam's phone vibrated on the table, breaking the moment. Emma glanced at the screen. The name, Mia, flashed across it. A cold chill ran down her spine. Something about the name felt off, suspicious even. With trembling hands, Emma picked up the phone. Sarah noticed her sudden change in attitude but remained silent, unsure of what was happening. Emma hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen, but the call went through, and she heard a voice. A woman's voice. "Babe, please check your messages," the woman on the other end said before hanging up. Emma's pulse quickened. The world around her seemed to blur as she read Sam's text messages. There it was, a message from Mia, and as she opened it, her heart sank deeper. Asterisk, "Babe, spending time with you last week was amazing. I'd like more of that and can't wait to get back together. XOXO, asterisk." The words burned into her mind. Her hands started shaking, and she dropped the phone onto her lap. It felt like a cruel betrayal. Emma's mind raced. Has Sam been with someone else? While she lay in a hospital bed, Vulnerable and unaware of the world around her, was Sam seeing another woman. Emma screamed. The sound was raw, an emotional expression of pain and confusion. Sarah rushed over, her face filled with concern. "Emma, what happened?" she asked, kneeling beside her. Emma handed her the phone, her face pale and her breathing shallow. Sarah's eyes scanned the message quickly, her expression shifting to one of understanding, but not shock. She knew about Sam's life before everything had spiraled out of control. This was a mess born out of Emma's accident, Sam's kindness, and circumstances none of them could have foreseen. "Emma, listen to me," Sarah said gently. "This isn't what you think. Sam had a life before all of this, before we dragged him into this crazy situation. It doesn't mean he's done anything wrong." But Emma couldn't process Sarah's words. All she could see were the images in her mind. Sam with another woman, laughing, sharing moments, all while she was lost in her own world, trying to figure out who she was. She felt foolish, as if the comfort she had drawn from Sam was built on lies. "Please, Emma, trust me," Sarah pleaded, knowing she couldn't explain everything without making things worse. She could only hope Emma would give Sam a chance to explain. Emma nodded silently, but her mind was already spinning with doubts. She decided she wouldn't say anything to Sam, not yet. She needed to figure out what was really going on. The rest of the day passed in confusion for Emma, though she tried to focus on the small tasks. Reading a book, sipping tea, engaging in conversation with Sarah. The images and suspicions about Sam refused to leave her mind. And as night fell, Emma's sleep was plagued by strange, disjointed dreams. In her dreams, pieces of her past began to emerge, fragment by fragment. She saw glimpses of her old life, a cold apartment filled with loneliness. She remembered the sense of abandonment that had always haunted her, memories of betrayal and mistrust. Emma, before the accident, had been hardened, closed off from the world, terrified of letting anyone in. That part of her was now resurfacing, and it wasn't pretty. When she awoke the next morning, Emma felt the weight of her past bearing down on her. She couldn't trust Sam, not now, not with that message looming over them. He might have been kind, but how much of that kindness was genuine? She didn't even remember marrying him. Sam returned that morning, unaware of the emotional storm inside Emma. He greeted her warmly, but Emma's responses were cold, distant. He noticed the shift, but chalked it up to her recovery. After all, she had been through a traumatic ordeal. As the days passed, Emma began to push Sam away little by little. She distanced herself from him emotionally, unwilling to confront the truth, but also unable to live with the lies she believed were hidden between them. Sam, in his quiet patience, continued to support her, even though he could sense the growing rift. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room, Sam finally spoke up. "Emma, is everything okay? You've been distant." Emma stared at him, her eyes narrowing. The words she wanted to say, the accusations, the pain, all bubbled to the surface, but she swallowed them down. Instead, she simply nodded, offering a weak smile. "I'm fine," she lied. But in that moment, something in Sam's eyes changed. He knew there was more going on, but he decided to let it go. As Emma's memory continued to slowly return, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The fragments of her past that had resurfaced were filled with isolation and mistrust. Her relationships had been fraught with betrayal, and now she feared she was once again caught in a web of lies. The tension between Emma and Sam grew thicker with each passing day, and Emma knew that eventually, something would have to give. But as the pieces of her memory began to fall into place, she was faced with a choice: to confront the truth about Sam and her past, or to walk away, leaving behind the fragile hope of a new life with him. The choice would define not only their future, but also whether Emma could ever learn to trust again. Chapter 6. A storm reawakens. As Emma's memory began to return in sharp fragments, The gentle bond she had developed with Sam over the past few weeks began to feel like a lie. She sat up late that night, her mind racing, processing the pieces of her life that were once forgotten. Her chest tightened as memories of her independence, the woman she once was, and the control she had over her life before the accident came flooding back. The next morning, unable to contain her anger any longer, Emma confronted Sarah. The moment she opened her front door to her friend, there was no hint of the usual warmth or affection. Instead, Emma's eyes blazed with a fiery mix of betrayal and fury. "How could you do this to me, Sarah?" Emma shouted, her voice trembling. "You orchestrated a marriage to a man I didn't know while I was helpless, without even telling me." Sarah tried to reach out, her voice calm but pleading. "Emma, it wasn't like that. You were dying. There wasn't time to explain. Sam only did it to save your life." "Save my life?" Emma snapped, her voice cutting through the room. "I never asked to be saved like this. And now I'm bound to a man who was a complete stranger when I woke up from that surgery." Sarah's face softened, her eyes filled with guilt. "Emma, please. I know how hard this is for you. Sam is a good man, and he never meant to hurt you." But Emma was too furious to listen. She felt manipulated, like a pawn in a game she didn't want to play. Her trust in Sarah shattered. "You took my choices away. Both of you." That afternoon, still boiling with resentment, Emma waited for Sam to come home. When he finally walked in, she could barely look at him without her heart pounding with a mix of anger and confusion. Sam, seeing the storm in her eyes, cautiously asked, "Emma, what's wrong?" Emma stood tall, her voice cold and piercing. "What's wrong? You married me without my consent, Sam. I was at my weakest, and what did you do? Take advantage of the situation." Sam froze, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Take advantage?" "Emma, Don't." Emma interrupted, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "You barely knew me, and yet you agreed to marry me. Why, Sam? Was it a pity? Or were you hoping I'd never remember so you could play hero?" Sam took a step back, clearly wounded by her words. "It wasn't like that at all," he said quietly. "I never wanted this. But you needed help, and the doctors said it was the only way to save you. I couldn't just stand by and do nothing." But Emma wasn't hearing it. The weight of her inability to make the wedding decisions was too heavy, clouding her judgment. "You shouldn't have made that decision for me." Silence hung between them, thick and suffocating. Sam looked at her, the pain in his eyes deepening. "I'm sorry, Emma. I thought I was doing the right thing. But if you hate me for it, I'll leave." Emma, feeling both triumphant and devastated, turned her back to him. She had won the argument, but in her heart, something was breaking. Sam was the one constant during her recovery, the one person who had been patient, kind, and caring despite her harsh words and coldness. But now, it felt like that bond had been severed, perhaps beyond repair. As Sam slowly walked out of the room, Emma felt a pang of regret deep within her, though she refused to acknowledge it. She heard the door close behind him and was left alone in the quiet, her emotions swirling like a storm she couldn't escape. That night, as she lay in bed, the house felt emptier than ever. For the first time, she realized that Sam's presence had been a source of comfort, a comfort she had just pushed away. The warmth he had brought into her life during her recovery was now replaced by a cold, unsettling loneliness. Her thoughts drifted back to the moments they had shared, the quiet evenings, the gentle touches, the times he made her laugh despite herself. And now, as the anger subsided, Emma was left with nothing but her own doubts and guilt. Had she been too harsh? Had she misjudged him? But the scars of betrayal were too fresh, and her mind was still clouded by the storm of emotions she couldn't control. The storm wasn't just outside, it was inside her heart, and she had no idea how to calm it. Chapter 7. The Breaking Point. Sam sat in his empty apartment, the space around him mirroring the emptiness he felt inside. It had been weeks since he had last spoken to Emma. He had done everything he could to be there for her, to show her that he cared, but no matter how hard he tried, Emma had shut him out. Her memory had returned, but with it came the old walls she had built so high around her heart. The bond they had formed during her recovery felt like a distant memory, replaced by Emma's cold indifference. Sam had reached his breaking point when he finally walked away, understanding that love couldn't be forced. He had to let her go, even if it tore him apart inside. He slumped onto the couch, running a hand through his hair as he glanced at his phone. There were no messages from Emma, only a few from Sarah, checking in on him. She had been his only link to Emma, but even those conversations were bittersweet. Each message was a reminder of the distance between them and the fact that Emma had chosen to shut him out. Sam had always been someone who poured his heart into the people he cared about, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just a breakup, it was a marriage, one that had begun under extraordinary circumstances. He had married Emma to save her life, to give her a chance at recovery, but now, it felt like that same marriage was the source of his heartache. He thought back to the first time he had met her, how they had connected so unexpectedly. There was something about her, even before the accident, that had drawn him in. But now, as he sat alone, he questioned whether he had made a mistake. Had he been too naive? Too hopeful that he could break through the walls Emma had built around herself? Sam sighed deeply, his thoughts drifting to Mia, his ex-girlfriend who had left him years ago. That heartbreak had been difficult, but he had managed to move on. He had focused on his work, building his career as a fashion designer, using his creativity as an outlet for his pain. But this time, it was different. His marriage to Emma wasn't just a passing relationship, it was something deeper, something that had been born out of sacrifice and care. Despite the heartache, Sam couldn't regret his decision to marry Emma. He had done it out of love, even if that love wasn't returned in the way he had hoped. He had saved her life, and that was something he would never take back. He stood up and wandered over to his desk, where his latest designs lay scattered across the surface. His work had always been his refuge, the one thing he could rely on when everything else in his life felt out of control. He picked up a sketch pad, flipping through the pages of designs that had yet to come to life. As he sketched, his thoughts kept drifting back to Emma. How could things have gone so wrong? How could someone he cared about so deeply be so unreachable? He wasn't sure if he would ever understand, but he knew he had to keep moving forward. Sam's phone buzzed on the table, and he glanced at the screen. It was a message from Sarah, asking how he was doing. He hesitated for a moment before typing a quick response, assuring her that he was fine. But the truth was, he wasn't fine. He was heartbroken, and no amount of work or distraction could change that. Still, he knew he had to keep going. He couldn't dwell on what had happened with Emma forever. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. As Sam put down his sketch pad, he made a silent promise to himself. He would keep creating, keep moving forward, even if it meant doing it alone. He had survived heartbreak before, and he would survive it again. But this time, he will be stronger. This time, he would focus on himself and what he needed to heal. With a deep breath, Sam turned back to his work, letting his creativity flow. It was the only thing that made sense in a world that felt so uncertain. And as the hours passed, he realized that, maybe, just maybe, he would find a way to heal from this heartbreak too. Over the past weeks, Mia, Sam's ex-girlfriend, had been a constant presence, caring for him with unwavering patience. Her gentle touch and calm voice were a comfort to Sam's battered heart. As fashion designers, they collaborated on major projects, and she noticed the deep sadness on his face. The sparkle in his eyes had dimmed, and his smile was now a rare sight. Mia's concern for Sam grew with each passing day. She remembered the vibrant, charming man he once was, and it broke her heart to see him like this. One fateful night, as they worked together in his apartment, Mia asked Sam about his sorrow. "Hey, what's going on?" "You've been distant lately," Mia said, her voice soft and gentle. Sam hesitated, unsure how to share his pain. But Mia's empathetic gaze encouraged him to open up. "It's Emma," he began, his voice cracking. She doesn't remember me. Doesn't remember us. I saved her life, married her, and yet, she pushed me away." Mia listened intently, shock and empathy showing on her face. She had never seen Sam so vulnerable. "I tried to be patient, to give her space," Sam continued. "But it's hard when she looks at me like I'm a stranger. Like our love never existed." Mia's heart ached for Sam. She had always cared for him deeply, and seeing him hurt was unbearable. Determined to help Sam heal, Mia suggested rekindling their romance. Perhaps, she thought, rekindling their love could help Sam move on from Emma. "Sam, I know this might not be the right time, but I still have feelings for you," Mia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam's expression softened, and he took Mia's hand. "Mia, I appreciate your concern, but I'm still married to Emma," he said, his voice laced with regret. Determined, Mia helped Sam with the divorce paperwork. The following week, Sam finalized the documents and entrusted them to Sarah, explaining his decision to move on. Sarah's empathetic heart ached, but she understood Sam's perspective. Chapter 8. A Lonely Heart. The days had passed slowly, and Emma's heart ached more than she would admit, but her pride had built walls too high for her to break down. Every time she thought of Sam, a dull pang of regret washed over her. She missed him, but how could she acknowledge that? After all, in her mind, he had betrayed her. That text from Mia was the only proof she needed. The echoes of their brief life together haunted her every night. One evening, Sarah visited, bringing her usual warmth and energy. They sat in Emma's sunroom, where the golden light of dusk filtered in through the windows. Sarah studied Emma for a moment, then sighed, a mixture of anger and concern on her face. "You've been miserable without Sam, haven't you?" Sarah asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Emma stood up, but didn't respond immediately. "He cheated on me, Sarah. What else do you expect me to feel?" she finally replied, her voice betraying the vulnerability she tried to hide. Sarah shook her head. "You really don't know the full story, do you? Let me tell you what happened." Emma's brow furrowed in confusion, but she remained silent. Sarah took a deep breath and began. "Do you even remember how you met Sam?" Sarah asked gently, her tone softening. Emma stared blankly, the edges of her memory still blurry. "You were in that coffee shop, the one by the hospital. You had just gone through one of the worst days of your life, and Sam was the one who stepped in when no one else would." "What are you talking about?" Emma asked, growing impatient. "Emma, you were about to undergo surgery that must be carried out within 24 hours, but the doctors won't commence it as it was critical, and they needed a guardian. Remember, you have no one related to you by blood as you're an orphan. That could have left you with nothing, not your future. Sam didn't know you, but he married you within 24 hours just to ensure your survival, just so you'd have someone there for you." Emma blinked, stunned. "Wait, what?" "Now I know why Sam said he married me to save my life," Emma thought. Sarah nodded. "He didn't have to. He had his own life, his own dreams. But he stayed by your side every step of the way, before and after the surgery." "But that message," Emma started, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest. "You think Sam cheated on you?" Sarah's voice rose in frustration. "That message wasn't what you thought. Sam had a life before you, before all of this, but he let it go because he cared enough about you. He gave up so much, and you never even asked him about it. Did you ever think to talk to him instead of jumping to conclusions?" Presenting the divorce papers and Sam's words. "Emma, Sam thinks it's best if you two go your separate ways," Sarah explained gently. Emma's world crumbled. The thought of losing Sam forever was unbearable. Without hearing the rest, Emma snatched the papers and rushed to Sam's apartment, her heart racing. The cool evening air whipped through her hair as she hastened through the streets. The door creaked open to reveal Sam, laptop glowing in the dim light. Emma's tear-filled eyes locked onto his. "How dare you leave me?" she exclaimed, voice trembling. "How dare you try to divorce me? How could you, Sam?" Sam stood frozen, confusion etched on his face. "Emma, please." "Don't please me," Emma interrupted, her voice rising. "You're giving up on me? On us?" Sam's arms opened, inviting her in. "Emma, How could you?" Emma repeated, her fists pounding his chest as she sobbed uncontrollably. Sam's arms enveloped her, holding her close. "Please, Sam, don't leave me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I love you. Please don't leave me, Sam." Sam's gaze searched hers, emotions swirling. "You pushed me away, Emma," he whispered back. Tears streaming down her face, Emma replied, "I know. I'm sorry. I was insecure, Sam. Please don't leave me. I love you." Sam's voice cracked. "I love you too, Emma." Their lips met in a passionate, intense kiss, releasing pent-up emotions. The world around them melted away, leaving only the two of them, lost in their love. As they broke apart for air, Sam's eyes locked onto Emma's. "I won't leave you," he promised. Emma's smile faltered. "I'm scared," she admitted. Sam's arms tightened around her. "I'm scared too," he said. "But we'll face it together." Their lips met again, sealing their love. As they broke apart, gasping for air, Emma's eyes sparkled with tears. Sam's thumbs gently wiped them away. "I've missed you so much," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. Sam's smile lit up his face. "I've missed you more," he replied, his voice filled with emotion. Their lips met again, softer this time, savoring the reunion. Emma's hands wrapped around Sam's neck, deepening the kiss. His arms enveloped her, holding her close. Time stood still as they lost themselves in the moment. Finally, they parted, foreheads touching. "I love you," Emma whispered. "I love you too," Sam replied, his voice filled with conviction. The room fell silent, except for their soft breathing. Emma's gaze searched Sam's face. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For pushing you away. For not remembering." Sam's fingers traced her jawline. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "I understand. You were scared." Emma nodded, tears welling up. "I was so scared of losing you," she admitted. Sam's arms tightened around her. "You'll never lose me," he promised. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the world outside melted away. The divorce papers, once a harsh reality, now seemed like a distant memory. Their love had conquered all. But as the night wore on, reality began to seep in. "Sam?" Emma said, her voice hesitant. "Yeah? What about Mia?" Sam's expression softened. "Mia and we're just friends, though my ex," he reassured. "She helped me through a tough time, but my heart belongs to you." Emma's eyes searched his. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not trusting you." Sam's smile returned. "You don't have to apologize," he said. "We're starting fresh." Their lips met once more. As the night gave way to dawn, Emma and Sam sat together. Their love story was far from over. But for now, they enjoy the moment. Chapter 9. Love and Struggle. Mia sat in Sam's apartment, staring at the divorce papers on the coffee table. She had helped Sam prepare them, thinking it would be the best way to move on from Emma. But now, looking at the documents, a feeling of regret hit her. Had she been too hasty? Had she truly let go of Sam? The doorbell broke the silence. It was Sarah. "Hey, Mia, I need to talk to you," Sarah said gently. Mia's heart sank. What is it? Sam and Emma. They're back together, Sarah revealed. But how? Sarah explained the events of the previous night. Emma's sudden appearance and the reconciliation. Mia listened, numb. She thought she'd been prepared for this moment, but the sting of rejection still hurt. I thought he was moving on, Mia whispered. Sarah's arms enveloped her. Mia, Sam loves Emma. He always has, Sarah said softly. Tears pricked at Mia's eyes. I know, she said, her voice cracking. I thought maybe. Sarah held her close. You deserve someone who loves you just as much, Sarah reassured. Mia nodded, wiping away tears. She knew Sarah was right. It was time to let go. But as she looked at the divorce papers, now useless, a spark of determination ignited within her. She would move on. She would find her own love story. The air between Emma and Sam felt heavy with the weight of unspoken words and unresolved tension. Their once tender moments seemed like distant memories, overtaken by the struggles of living together and learning to navigate the complexities of their relationship. Emma's fears had resurfaced, manifesting in bursts of insecurity, while Sam found himself wrestling with his own uncertainties about their future. Both had deep feelings for one another, but love alone wasn't enough. The real challenge was learning how to live and grow together, despite their differences. Emma, still haunted by her past, often found herself on edge. The memory of her accident and the vulnerability it had exposed made her guarded, and she feared opening up completely. This led to moments of frustration where she would lash out at Sam, convinced that he couldn't truly understand her. Sam, on the other hand, was trying his best to be patient, but there were moments where he, too, reached his limits. Emma's walls seemed impenetrable at times, and Sam wasn't sure how to break through. One evening, after a particularly heated argument, they found themselves standing on opposite sides of the living room, with silence between them. Sam's voice finally broke through. Emma, I can't keep doing this if you keep pushing me away. I need you to trust me. Emma looked away, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I do trust you, Sam. It's just, I'm scared. I don't know how to let you in without getting hurt. Sam stepped closer, his expression softening. You're not the only one who's scared. But we can't grow together if we don't face this. We need to stop fighting each other and start fighting for each other. His words hung in the air, and for the first time in weeks, Emma felt a sense of clarity. She realized that while she had been protecting herself, she had been hurting the person she loved most. You're right, she whispered. I've been so focused on my own fears that I didn't see how much I was hurting you. They spent the rest of the night talking, opening up about their fears, insecurities, and desires. Sam revealed his own vulnerability, admitting that he had been struggling too, especially with the feeling that he wasn't enough for her. Emma, in turn, apologized for the walls she had built and promised to work on letting him in. The following days were not without their challenges. There were still arguments and moments of doubt, but each time, they came back to the promise they had made to fight for their relationship. They learned to communicate better, to listen instead of react, and to support each other through the ups and downs. As they grew stronger together, Emma began to realize that her love for Sam wasn't just about the romantic moments. They were partners in every sense of the word. Sam, too, discovered that their love was built on a foundation of trust, patience, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Emma decided to confront her past head-on. With Sam by her side, she sought closure on the painful memories that had been holding her back. This act of courage not only helped her heal, but also brought them closer than ever. The bond they shared became unbreakable, forged through love and struggle, and they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Chapter 10. A proper beginning. The following weeks were a whirlwind of change. Emma and Sam began to spend more time together, not out of obligation, but because they genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The small, shared moments, cooking breakfast together, laughing at a bad TV show, or simply sitting in comfortable silence, became the foundation on which they rebuilt their relationship. Emma's barriers were still there, but they were slowly coming down, piece by piece, as she allowed herself to be vulnerable with Sam. One night, after a particularly emotional day, Emma found herself lying in bed, unable to sleep. Thoughts of her past, her insecurities, and her fears all swirled in her mind, making it impossible to find peace. She had spent so long hiding from her emotions, but now they were all crashing down on her at once. Before she could talk herself out of it, she got up and went to Sam's room. He was still awake, reading a book, but when he saw her standing in the doorway, he immediately set it aside. "Emma?" he asked, concerned. She didn't say anything at first, but then, without warning, she walked over to him and wrapped her arms around his neck. Sam froze for a moment, surprised by the sudden embrace, but then he relaxed, his arms gently encircling her waist. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she whispered against his shoulder. "You don't have to be," Sam replied softly, pulling her closer. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other in the quiet stillness of the night. It wasn't about romance or passion, it was about comfort, about feeling safe in each other's presence. And in that moment, Emma realized that maybe, just maybe, she could trust Sam with her heart. Over the next few months, they continued to grow closer, their relationship evolving into something stronger, something real. It wasn't perfect, there were still arguments, still moments of doubt, but they had learned to communicate, to listen to each other, and to support one another through the ups and downs. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Emma turned to Sam with a small smile. "You know, I never thought I'd say this," she began, her voice quiet but sincere, "but I'm glad we met at that coffee shop." Sam chuckled softly, glancing at her. "Me too." They fell into a comfortable silence, both of them content in the knowledge that, despite everything they had been through, they had finally found their way to each other. It wasn't the fairy tale ending either of them had imagined, but it was real, and that was more than enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the world, Emma leaned her head on Sam's shoulder, her heart full of a quiet, steady happiness. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Emma's eyes locked onto Sam's as they sat together. "Tell me something you've never shared with anyone," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam's gaze drifted out to the horizon before returning to Emma's. "I've always feared losing the people I care about," he admitted, vulnerability etched on his face. "After my parents passed away, I built walls to protect myself, but being with you makes me want to tear them down." Emma's expression softened. She reached for Sam's hand, intertwining their fingers. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "I'm here." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma shared her own fears and dreams. Sam listened attentively, his eyes sparkling with empathy. "I want to travel the world, experience new cultures, and help those in need," Emma said, her voice filled with passion. "But I've been stuck, afraid to take the leap." "Sam," Emma's voice trembled. "There's something I've never told anyone." Sam's grip on her hand tightened. "You can trust me, Emma." Emma took a deep breath. "I was in foster care for a few years after my mom left," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I felt so alone, unwanted. But one foster family. They were kind. They made me feel loved." Emma's eyes welled up with tears. "But when I turned 18, I had to leave. I felt abandoned all over again." Sam's face contorted in anguish. He pulled Emma into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Emma," he whispered. "No one should ever feel that way." Emma's tears fell onto Sam's shoulder as she let go of the pain she'd carried for years. "I've been afraid to love, to let anyone in, Emma admitted, her voice muffled against Sam's chest. "But you make me feel seen, heard." Sam's arms held her close, a safe haven. "You're not alone, Emma. I'm here. I see you. I hear you." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had shared her deepest secret, and Sam's love and acceptance enveloped her. Their lips met in a tender kiss. "I love you, Emma," Sam whispered. "I love you too, Sam," Emma replied, her voice filled with conviction. In that moment, they realized their unconventional start had blossomed into something real and strong. Emma and Sam had found a love worth fighting for. Chapter 11. Happily Ever After. The soft glow of twilight bathed the sky in shade of pink and lavender as Sam and Emma stood hand in hand, gazing out over the lush green valley. The breeze whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves like a soft, quiet song, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt at peace. Her fingers intertwined with Sam's, the warmth of his touch grounding her as she took in the beauty of the moment. They had come so far, through doubt, pain, and fear, and yet, here they were. Standing at the threshold of a new beginning, Emma could hardly believe how much had changed in such a short time. Her journey from a place of mistrust and emotional walls to this moment of vulnerability was one she never imagined she'd take. But Sam had been there every step of the way, patient and steady, even when things seemed impossible. Emma turned to him, her eyes soft and full of the affection that had blossomed between them. "I never thought I'd get here," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Sam squeezed her hand gently. "Neither did I," he said with a chuckle, though his tone was earnest. "But I'm glad we did." The past few months had been a whirlwind of emotions, arguments, and self-discovery. Emma had pushed Sam away time and time again, afraid of getting too close, too vulnerable. But in the end, it was Sam's unwavering love and his refusal to give up on her that broke down the last of her defenses. He had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway. That realization had changed everything for Emma. "We should do it," Sam said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Do what?" Emma asked, though she had a feeling she already knew what he was about to say. "A proper wedding," Sam said with a grin, his eyes sparkling with mischief and sincerity. "I know the first one was, well, less than traditional," he joked, recalling the haste, almost transactional nature of their initial marriage. "But now that everything's out in the open and we're really in this together, I think we should have the kind of wedding we deserve." Emma felt her heart beating at the thought. A proper wedding. Not just something thrown together out of necessity, but a real celebration of their love, a love that had endured so much and grown stronger for it. The idea of walking down the aisle, knowing that every step was taken with purpose and joy, felt like the perfect culmination of their journey. She smiled up at him, her chest tightening with emotion. "Yeah," she said softly. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, Emma and Sam threw themselves into planning the wedding. Unlike the chaos and uncertainty that had marked the beginning of their marriage, this time everything was filled with excitement and anticipation. Emma found herself laughing more, smiling more, and even letting herself dream of a future she had once thought impossible. Sam, ever the steady rock, took charge of the logistics. He reached out to friends and family, sent out invitations, and made sure every detail was perfect. But it wasn't just the planning that kept him busy. He and Emma were also working on their relationship, continuing to grow and learn from each other. They still had moments of tension, of course. No relationship was perfect. But now, they faced those challenges together, instead of letting them drive a wedge between them. As they navigated the complexities of planning a wedding, Emma found herself reflecting on how much had changed within her. She wasn't the same guarded woman who had woken up with no memory, afraid to trust anyone. She had grown, thanks to Sam, and thanks to her own strength. She had learned to let people in, to trust, and to love deeply. And for that, She would always be grateful. When the day of the wedding finally arrived, it was everything they had dreamed of. Set in a small, picturesque garden surrounded by family and close friends, the atmosphere was one of love and celebration. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and the sound of soft music floated through the breeze. Emma stood before a mirror, dressed in a simple yet elegant white gown that flowed like water as she moved. Her reflection stared back at her soft, confident, and with a light in her eyes that she hadn't seen in a long time. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of calm wash over her. This was it. This was the moment where everything they had worked for, everything they had fought through, would be cemented in their hearts. There was a knock at the door, and Sarah entered, her face beaming with excitement. "You look beautiful," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Emma smiled, turning to face her friend. "Thank you," she said quietly, feeling the weight of the moment settle over her. "I wouldn't be here without you, you know." Sarah waved her hand dismissively, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "You would have found your way eventually," she said with a soft laugh. "But I'm glad I could help nudge you in the right direction." The two women shared a look, one of deep understanding and appreciation. Sarah had been there through it all, her steady support helping Emma navigate the darkest parts of her journey. And now, she was here to witness the culmination of that journey. As Emma walked down the aisle toward Sam, she felt as though time had slowed. Every step was deliberate, every heartbeat loud in her ears. Sam stood at the altar, his eyes locked on hers, a look of pure love and admiration on his face. He had been her anchor, her guiding light, and now, as they stood ready to pledge their lives to one another in the most sacred way, Emma knew without a doubt that they were meant to be. When she reached him, Sam took her hands in his touch warm and steady as always. The officiant began speaking, but Emma barely heard the words. All she could focus on was Sam. His eyes, his smile, the way he held her hands as if he never wanted to let go. And in that moment, she realized that this was it. This was home. "I love you," Sam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you too," Emma replied, her heart swelling with the weight of those words. The ceremony was simple, yet perfect. As they exchanged vows, promising to love, support, and cherish one another through all of life's ups and downs, Emma felt the last of her fears melt away. This was real. This was love. And it was stronger than anything she had ever known. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from their friends and family filled the air. Emma leaned in, pressing her lips to Sam's in a kiss that felt like a promise, one of forever. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, Emma knew that no matter what challenges the future held, they would face them together. Stronger for the trials they had already overcome and ready to take on whatever came next. And as they walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, Emma couldn't help but smile. This was just the beginning. A beginning filled with hope, love, and the promise of a happily ever after.